My opinion, premium build quality is there. The keyboard is fantastic, beautifully done touchpad, excellent size, GAN power adapter, which is lighter and thinner than pretty much all of the competitors. There's a 280 watts, and additionally the screen is absolutely beautiful, gorgeous display. The RTX 4060 is a little bit of a letdown. If you're looking at this as a standalone device, you've never owned a laptop before, the value proposition is huge. If you factor in the cost, however, the fact that this device with a 4060 and only 16 gigabytes of RAM costs 4,000 Canadian dollars, I don't think the value proposition is there. It simply does not make sense in this day and age that you're going to pay $4,000 for a laptop that has 16 gigs of RAM, which I've demonstrated in many videos of gameplay that maxes out that system RAM, as well as the GPU VRAM, which is only 8 gigabytes on that 4060, simply isn't enough for upcoming and future games. If this is going to be your one and only device, perhaps that brings up the value proposition a little bit, as this can do pretty much anything and everything you can throw at it. It's well appointed with ports, plugged in mode. This thing just has horsepower for days. Okay, after poking around in all the different aspects of this laptop, it's now time to talk GPU performance. So I wanted to have a little chat with you guys about what I feel is the GPU performance of these laptops. So if we look at it objectively, the fact that we can get an 18-inch Quad HD Plus screen at 240 Hertz that can be driven by an RTX 4060, and you can natively, at that native QHD Plus resolution, you can game anywhere between 30 to 60 FPS with everything cranked, I think is very impressive on its own. If you look at it in a vacuum, if you've never owned a laptop before, or if this is your first gaming laptop, you will buy this and you will just be amazed with this. And that's my opinion. Unless you are one of those guys who are in competitive esports, or you're looking for a laptop that does triple digit frame rates or very high frame rates in many of the games that you play, and you play a specific type of game that you know you need that type of frame rate, then you may be a little bit displeased with the performance of this laptop. If we look at this in light of the 2000 series laptops and the 3000 series laptops of last year and of the year prior to that, I would say that the performance bump is not all that significant. That said though, and a little bit of work on adjusting the settings, you should probably be able to hit at high settings 60 FPS lock pretty much on any game from the last 5 years, and maybe even a little bit into the future. The one qualm I do have about the RTX 4060 is that it only runs at between 80 to 100 watts depending on if you're running in silent mode, balance mode, or if you're running with the custom mode with everything set to full blast, which includes the CPU set to boost mode, the GPU set to high, and the max fans engaged on this Razer Blade 18 for 2023. Another thing I would add about the 4060 in these laptops is that the VRAM is not enough. In my experience, I've been running 5-year-old games such as Borderlands 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, and they're all pretty much maxing out the 8 gigs of VRAM when you crank up the settings all the way. If there's any indication of how complex games are becoming, complex geometry with the Unreal Engine, Nanite, Lumen, all of this other tech that's really coming up, it's a very exciting time to be a gamer and to be in the gaming laptop space. But that said, 8 gigs of RAM, VRAM is not enough in this day and age. So I would say look at getting a higher CPU model if you can afford it, or if you can't, if you're really budget constrained, you should be looking at some of the last year's models, such as the 3080 Ti equipped models, which sometimes are $1,000 off depending on where you're looking and if you find the right deal. That would be the best bet for you. And how about the NVIDIA Optimus on this device? I found that NVIDIA Optimus works pretty well. It's been a few generations now that they've been tuning this thing, and this technology works fantastic. The device can switch and it can maintain better battery life when you're unplugged and away from the wall. I did also test using the dedicated GPU mode. So you can go into the BIOS, switch it to use the RTX 4060 at all times. It really drains your battery life. Good luck if you can get 2 hours out of this thing. But I didn't find that to offer any significant performance bump or improvements. So in my opinion, that's not worth it. Stay in the advanced Optimus mode, get the benefit of both unplugged and plugged in usage, and the RTX 4060 will perform just fine. A few times I did note that when you jump into a game or quit a game, perhaps it was because I was running OBS, I can't be certain, but it felt like it also happens when I'm not recording the games, is that you'll see a 5-second freeze kind of as Windows or NVIDIA. I'm not sure what is happening in the system, but something is toggling between that dedicated GPU and then switching back to the integrated GPU that's inside the Intel CPU in this device. And finally, before we conclude on the GPU front, one more thing I want to mention, or rather two things. One is, if you're not sold on the whole ray tracing thing, and I am certainly not, then I don't think there's any particular reason to buy an NVIDIA GPU unless you have also a content creator workflow that you need that encoding for. So NVENC encoding or AV1 encoding, use your hardware GPU. The other interesting thing is that you should hold out and see what AMD has to bring to the table. The rumor mill is saying that the 7600S or whatever the new laptop low power GPU solutions are going to be coming from AMD are going to be very, very competitive on raster performance. That means no ray tracing, but all of the other graphical stuff that you're going to get. FSR3 is coming down the pipe, so that is AMD's answer to DLSS3 from NVIDIA. So you're going to get all of the goodies and benefits from the frame generation like tech that AMD is going to bring to the table. And AMD devices will generally be cheaper than their NVIDIA counterparts. If nothing else, that competition in the market may just push NVIDIA to lower prices, and you may be able to get a better deal. So if you can hold out, there's some really good stuff coming on the horizon. This is just early days still. NVIDIA's played their hand with all of their laptop series for the 4000 GPUs. If you buy right now, you're also paying for the early adopter tax, which means you're paying sky high prices for devices which are going to be heavily discounted, I guarantee it, by Black Friday this year. This device features an Intel i9-13950HX. Here I've got a Cinebench R23 run on this device, and if we look at single core results, we're getting 1836 points, and if we look at the multi-core, it's well above 26,000. And this testing was done using Razer Synapse set to custom mode with CPU set to boost, GPU set to high, and max fan speed. Besides the very fast Threadripper processors, this is pretty much at the top of the line right now in terms of CPUs, even in mobile devices. And the performance we're getting out of these is just sheer raw power. At full power, if we look at the hardware info results here, at full power, this device consumes about 130 watts. If we look at the maximum, averaging about 120 watts on the PL2 and about 111 on PL1 when it's running at full speed mode, running these benchmarks. It does hit 100 degrees Celsius, but it quickly settles to around 70, high 70s, 77, 78 degrees. CPU-wise, we have nothing to complain about in terms of CPU performance, cores galore. I'm actually leaving a lot of performance on the table, and this is even overkill for my developer workflows where I'm running multiple browsers, multiple windows, terminals, Windows subsystem for Linux, along with tons of Docker containers, having Slack open, and just tons of browser tabs and windows spread across the machine. More bottlenecked right now is the RAM on this device. So 16 gigabytes of RAM is not enough for a power user workflow of any type today in 2023. So I would urge you to look at getting more RAM before you look at upgrading your CPU. I'm sure many of you are wondering what the battery life is like on this device. After using it for nearly a week with multiple extended sessions away from the power cord, I wanted to give you my impressions of how this device has been in terms of battery life, and also touch on how the charging speed is like with this device. What we'll look at here is the task manager, because I think it'll give you some sort of an idea of how heavily I use my machine, and based on that, I'll then give you my estimates, which I think is more realistic versus just a browser sitting and loading an HTML page endlessly, because frankly, I don't know who sits there and does that. I've got my Task Manager open. So you can see here that I'll have multiple browsers open because I kind of segment, the work priorities by browser. Then I use Slack for internal messaging. I have Task Manager open here. I have Terminal open with a few different tabs in Windows where I'm running PowerShell. Perhaps WSL is open in one tab, and I may be running a bunch of other tabs with Node.js running my application, maybe a Java app, maybe some Python code running in the background so I can work and develop as I go throughout my day. And lastly, I'll have Visual Studio Code open at the moment. I may also have from time to time IntelliJ open as well. That is a bit of a memory hog. It uses 2 gigs or so of memory. So I also have Docker running in the background. A lot of Docker images are running on my device while I'm developing throughout the day. There's other Docker services here that are using resources, and I think that's really about it for my developer workflow. If we go over to the performance tab here, performance tab, and we'll take a look at what that utilization actually looks like on this device. So if you can see here that 13950HX, the 24 core 32 threads CPU, is actually overkill for my daily workflow. As you can see here, it's sitting at mostly idle. Most of the cores are sitting there doing nothing, particularly on the last row there. Maybe it wasn't such a wise investment after all. But what is crucial here is the RAM. If you look at the memory here, I'm exhausting the memory, the system memory here. 96% of the memory is being used, and the more you use the memory, that means larger amounts of memory are being written to the disk and read from the disk repeatedly, which causes performance impact on your device. Also wear and tear on your SSD. The only thing right now that's lit up is the GPU because I'm using OBS to do this screen capture and show you guys what my performance and battery life looks like. And now I'll talk about how I kind of tune my machine for work. So if you look at the startup tab here, I like to disable everything that is not necessary. The other thing I want to show you here is that if I go into battery, it's not on right now because I'm plugged in. So I will enable the battery saver mode here. The other thing I do is I turn down the brightness for my display. At 30%, it's very, very usable. I've been using it throughout the day with sunlight, windows, and whatnot. And if we look quickly at the settings for the battery life here, so it says 9 minutes left to charging, but I can show you here that this morning I used this device and it was basically about 3 hours, roughly 3 hours, a little few minutes shy of 3 hours with battery saver mode turned on, 30% brightness. It's a little bit disappointing. This device does have fast charging support. You can get from 0 completely empty, which I tested again this morning, from 0 up to 50% in roughly about 32-ish minutes, around 9 a.m. to start my workday, and 10, 11, and you can see here noon. At noon it was 2% battery, so roughly 3 hours out of this device. Overall, the 91 watt hour battery in this machine with a pretty typical usage, for developers or power users, will get you about 3 hours of usage, which isn't bad, but I don't think that's something that you can live without carrying your power adapter with you. Now let's take a look at the keyboard on this device. This is the Razer Blade 18 for 2023 with the RTX 4060. So I'll open up the lid here. You reach in with your nail and you can open one-handed, no problem. It opens up pretty easily. It's a nice sturdy and it's a stiff hinge, so hopefully it will last many, many years, and I don't think there'll be any problem with the hinge becoming loose or laggy or kind of wobbly. There is a bit of screen wobble, but I think that's pretty normal for most laptops. Seeing that this hinge is quite stiff, it's actually a little bit less than what I would see in other gaming laptops, so that is a plus. Turn this on and show you guys the actual RGB keyboard because I think this one is excellent. I mean, Razer is known for their RGB, and this particular implementation here is absolutely fantastic. So let me just zoom in. I'll center this under my camera here, and let's fire this boy up. All right, here we go. I love the way that Razer has done this. The actual font is very, very nice. They're very crisp. They're sharp. It's a refined. It's a very nice sans serif font. And I like the way that the lettering is so refined. There's no light bleed whatsoever from around the keycaps. You get only the light from through the keycaps, which is exactly what you want for really good RGB. And Razer has done an excellent job here. And particularly if you go into the Razer Synapse software, the options that you can use to customize these lighting effects is tremendous. There's so much opportunity to customize here. Let's do a quick typing test and see how it feels. So hand positions are fantastic. It's centered, so it feels right. I don't feel like I'm off to the side here like this and trying to struggle to type, because when your hand is like this, reaching on the home row can be a little bit troubling. Okay, a quick typing test for you guys to show you how this keyboard feels and how fast I can get up to speed on this thing, and how many mistakes I made. I'm using the typingcat.com to do my typing speed test. It's only a minute, so let's jump in here and see how the typing experience is on this Razer keyboard. Okay, so 1 minute typing test there. My accuracy here is 90%. I made quite a few errors and I have mixed feelings about this keyboard overall. I love the look of it. I love the fact that it's centered. There's no squished keypad off to the right. That means the trackpad is also vertically centered. The lighting effects are excellent. I really am enjoying the RGB on this keyboard. It's so precise and so refined. It just feels like it's how RGB should be done. But I have mixed feelings overall about the typing impressions of this keyboard. I make a lot of mistakes on this one because it's quite shallow and I'm used to mechanical keyboards with my desktops now for several years. So I've kind of moved away from the MacBook Pro 2016 era where it was just a very flat butterfly keyboard. And this feels exactly like an equivalent of the butterfly keyboard, except you're on the Windows platform here on a Razer device. So is that a good thing? I guess it's going to depend on your personal preference. For me personally, I don't think this is the keyboard for me. I just want to touch on the trackpad as well. So the trackpad on this device is a Windows Precision trackpad. It is a glass surface. It is very smooth. It's not quite as slick as the one on the Rogue Strix G18. I just felt that that was a little bit too slippery. If that's a thing that's possible, your fingers would just kind of glide if I was basically doing air hockey. It was a weird feeling and took a little bit of time getting used to this. There's still enough of a texture that you feel like you're interacting with the device. The touch stuff is much easier to do here. I don't feel like I have to add pressure in order to do touch gestures. And the multi-touch gestures are absolutely fantastic. No issues with that whatsoever. I have not had any, and the clicks are pretty nice. I don't see any wobble or feel any wobble in this device, although it looks like there may be some play here, but there really isn't. Unless you're really pressing down on this trackpad very hard, then again, I don't know why you'd be doing so. These are pretty sensitive and you can get away with just finger taps most of the time. One thing I have found irritating is when I have my hands here, if I like to use sometimes my hand like this and work like this on the laptop, and I found that I will just kind of rest here and some of my wrist will lay on the trackpad and it will cause it to kind of jump around and do strange gestures. I have gone in and adjusted the sensitivity, but it still happens on occasion from time to time. It's not a big issue. You just have to lift up your hand or adjust the way that you're touching the trackpad. I think they could have actually done with, frankly, a little bit smaller trackpad, pushed it up a little bit, maybe around here. And then you could have had a little bit more bottom lip here so that it would have been easier. Another quick but really cool feature of this keyboard is that when you press the function keys, it lights up only the function row so you can find what it is that you're looking for. So for example, if I press the left FN key here, it dims all of the other lighting and it only highlights the function row. If I release it, it returns back to full lighting. I can do the same thing with the right hand function key. If I press this, again, it dims the keyboard and it lights up both the function number, so F1 through F12, but also the multimedia keys underneath that are often used. And talking about the display on this Razer Blade 18 for 2023 with the RTX 4060, I don't think I can offer enough praise for that 18-inch Quad HD Plus 2560 by 1600 16 by 10 aspect ratio 240 Hz 3 millisecond display with 100% DCI-P3 coverage and 500 nits of brightness. If I was to sum it up in one word, I would say brilliant. And this display is absolutely fantastic. The colors are stunning. The brightness is amazing. The luminance and clarity, even at very low brightness levels for using in dark environments, absolutely fantastic. Or just for preserving battery life. And the color reproduction, the motion fluidity on this device, if I'm looking at it subjectively and comparing it to my 144 Hz gaming monitor, boy, this is just a joy to look at. And the sharpness is absolutely there because that QHD Plus at 18 inches still gives you lots and lots of pixel density. So you get lots of sharp images, sharp text, no blurry lines to speak of, and when gaming, the colors just kind of pop. It is a joy. Though it is still an IPS screen and not an OLED, this is probably the cream of the crop. This may not be a dream machine with the Razer Blade 18 for 2023, but I can tell you this much. That display is definitely a dream display. Well done. By default, the Razer Blade 18 for 2023 comes installed with this Razer Central. So if you click this, is a handy way to get to some shortcuts here. If you click the first icon, which is the laptop, it brings you into the laptop performance and configuration settings. If you go over to Synapse here, this will kind of get you there as well. It depends on if you had Razer Synapse previously open. If I launch it from this menu here, I can get to this settings as well. Here you can select your functions if you want these to be function keys or multimedia keys for your keyboard for this top row here. You can also disable the trackpad from Razer Synapse, so the shortcut. And I love that, for power users, Razer has provided all of these shortcuts that are pre-mapped. So if I press function T, it disables my trackpad. So now using my mouse here does nothing. Might be handy for gameplay if you're getting, accidental touches or accidentally switching out into Windows and going, what has just happened? So nice feature. Thank you very much, Razer. The other thing is, if you click here, you can also get to the Chroma Effects Studio. So this is where all of your lighting effects for your RGB keyboard are managed. This is the dashboard, the home screen of this device. So if you look at modules here, because this laptop is equipped with far-field microphones, that means you can install Alexa on this thing, and you'll be able to talk to your laptop and say, hey Alexa, what is the time? Hey Alexa, what is this question? And get some quick answers. The next thing that's of interest is if you go over to the system tab, you've got a few different options here. There's customize. So again, this is the same page where you can select your function keys, disable and enable your trackpad. There's also an interesting game mode here where you can decide to turn off Alt Tab, Alt F4 or Windows key. If we jump into performance here, I believe this is the more interesting one feature in this control panel. So if you look here in the performance mode, we've got two tabs. We've got plugged in and on battery. On battery, you only get one option. It's balanced mode. It tries to manage using NVIDIA Optimist. On plugged in mode, you've got a few different options here. There's a balanced mode, silent, and custom. Silent is quite literally silent. You will not hear anything audible from the laptop. So let's continue here. Balanced mode is the default that you'll see when you launch this or when you open up the machine for the first time. Auto default manages the fan speeds automatically based on what the temperature is and thresholds that Razer has pre-selected. The more interesting mode is custom. So this is where all of your overclocking and power adjustments happen. So here you can overclock your CPU. You can set it all the way to boost mode if you want to get the maximum performance out of this. This will push as many watts as it can to the CPU for gaming, particularly for CPU intensive games. The other interesting feature is GPU. You can set the performance profiles. The unfortunate thing here, I believe, which is a missed opportunity by Razer in my opinion, is that please add wattages here. If you're giving us this much control over our device, it is nice for us to know how much power and how much wattage is being pushed into either of these devices so we can fine tune to the performance levels that we prefer. And also here you have max fan speed mode. So if you turn this on, it will really crank the fans all the way to 100%. Again, with the keyboard shortcuts, fantastic touch. Thank you very much. And if I press function and P, you'll see here I can just toggle between the modes and it's instantaneous. Moving over to the display tab, we've got some display resolution information here and we've got some refresh rates that we can select. Also, there's a shortcut here, function R, it will toggle. It's a little bit jittery, so be patient. If I press function plus R, it toggles, and you also see this on-screen display in the bottom right-hand corner to notify you that you're now switching your refresh rate. Also, if you enable this, it will basically switch automatically to 60 Hertz when you unplug your laptop. So that's a very nice feature to have to tune down the power usage by the display. And the other thing of interest here is the GPU mode. So here it's running currently in Advanced Optimist. If you click this, you'll open up the NVIDIA control panel, and from here you can select this option to switch over to the NVIDIA GPU only mode. The other option is to do this from the BIOS. You can boot into the BIOS and select dedicated GPU mode. The next tab to look at is battery. There is a battery health optimizer here, but keep in mind this is only really applicable if you're going to leave this laptop charged or powered in with the wall adapter for long periods of time. And then of course lighting, here you can adjust how the lighting is controlled on the laptop. So this part here is for the system lighting, the brightness of the display precisely, and also the lighting on the Razer logo. So you can turn this off, you can make it do breathing, or you can turn it off completely. I like to turn it off. The other thing you can do is control your lighting for your keyboard effects. So on display here, on battery mode, you can select how many minutes after you want it to turn it off. And also if battery gets to a critical level, you can turn it off completely. What I like about Razer Synapse the most, it's very intuitive, it's very clean, it's not littered. If you look at some of the other tabs here, there's a profiles tab here. You can create specific configurations. You can set up a Razer account and do all of that stuff. Connect basically allows you to get, so this is where you'll see the games that are supported by Razer Chroma. That means you'll get specific keys lit up on your Razer keyboard on this laptop when you're playing a particular game that's recognized. It's a nice experience. This is a nice added touch. It's a quality of life feature. Thank you for that, Razer. And then Studio, of course, is where you adjust all of your lighting effects. You can go in and go nuts here. You can spend all day basically converting everything. And Visualizer, I have not tried this. I'm not really sure what this feature does. Don't really have much interest, so I'm just going to skip over that. Hello and welcome. So now we're here with the Razer Blade 18 for 2023. I've been using it for several days here, and I wanted to give you my initial impressions of the build quality of this machine. We'll take a look around the laptop here, and I'll show you some of the port selection that's available on this device, as well as the front, the back, the left and the right side, as well as the bottom cover. We'll look at how the fan venting is set up. The first impressions about build quality are that this thing smudges quite a bit. It does smudge and carry finger oils quite well. And I don't know if I tilt it up in the light here, maybe you can see there, it smudges nicely. They're not exactly visible unless, you know, it's kind of an anodized aluminum, black anodized aluminum. It's a very nice feeling. Sounds very solid as well. You know, there's no flex or twist inside this machine whatsoever. It is solid metal. And as we look here at the bottom of the machine, we'll start there and then we'll work our way around the sides. So if we look at the bottom, so on the bottom here, you can see as well, there does pick up fingerprints and smudges, but they're not quite as bad. I think wiping this off would be much, much easier with just a microfiber cloth. We look here, there's 3 fans that you can visibly see through the device holes. These vents are cut out. And if you put this device into max fan mode, you can definitely not only hear, but you can also feel the suction of the air through the fans if you have the laptop on your lap. And it almost feels like a little cooler that you have on your lap. So it's pretty interesting. The fans are very powerful indeed. They do push a lot of air. I wonder how long it'll take though before these get fully clogged up with dust, or if I'll have to be servicing this regularly by going in and basically cleaning the dust and removing it from this device here. So that's all really there is to say about the bottom of this device. It's a very clean machine. There's no real rough edges. And these rubber feet actually sit very nicely on my lap. I don't have any issues with using this device as a laptop. And now let's see. The other thing is, because it's so smooth and because it's so basically flat, it's very hard to grab off a table if you flip it upside down. When I was taking it out of the box initially, I had a heck of a time trying to get it up off the table. This lip at the back here also make it a nice little place to grab and hold, but I would suggest don't hold it from this side. If you're carrying this device, it gets very, very hot, this particular area here. I would say hold it from the other side and kind of keep this facing outward away from you towards your arm if possible. So this is the proprietary power plug. As you can see, this is not USB-C, but this is where you plug in the 230 watt power adapter. It is a GAN adapter. It's quite light compared to some of the other adapters. It's a little bit compact as well, more compact at least. I wish it could be still further compact, but anyway, that's a different story. So here we have a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and I've confirmed, yes, this one is a 2.5 gig Ethernet, and it's facing the right side up. So you'll be having the little pin or the clip that you push in with your Ethernet cable facing up, which is much easier to remove the cable. You have 2 USB type A ports. You have a Thunderbolt. I believe this one is the Thunderbolt equipped port. And you have on this side here, you have the headphone microphone combo jack. If we flip the device over, so on the front, not much, except that you can see that there is this lip that is there, so you can kind of reach in with your fingernail to grab. It's still quite tough because the hinge is very, very strong and sturdy, so you can see the groove a little bit better there. All right, and then if we flip around to the right-hand side of the device, so we've got an HDMI 2.1 port, another USB type A, and then we have another USB type C alt mode display port, and then we have at the very front here a UHS 2 SD card slot. And finally, at the back of the device, it's nothing. It's solid. It's just metal. All right, so now I'll give you a overview of opening this with one hand. What is that experience like? So I'll reach in here and grab with my thumbnail. It's a little bit tough. I kind of have to hold it down, but it is very easy to open with one hand. And with one finger, I can toggle it all the way down. And the hinge is very sturdy. It holds pretty well at all different angles. It has a little bit of wobble, but not too much play. I can almost have it fully closed, maybe half an inch before it actually wants to close shut. So there is the device. Okay, this is a webcam test of the Razer Blade 18 for 2023 with using the built-in microphones that are in this device. It's using Intel Smart Sound technology for the digital microphones, which is supposed to help give you clearer audio quality. And if you look at the webcam here, it's a 5 megapixel webcam that is IR enabled for Windows Hello support, so you could log in using facial recognition. How is it handling the background lighting here? I've got a lamp on this side and I've got a lamp on this side and some video lighting on this side here. It looks to be okay. I feel that the clarity is pretty good. I don't feel that this is a bad webcam at all. I feel now that we're probably on par with 5 megapixel selfie cameras that we had on smartphones maybe half a decade ago. So that is definitely progress for webcams, moving away from the 720p crap cams that have been in laptops forever. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. All right, after a good soak-in of thermals on this device here, the Razer Blade 18 for 2023, we're doing some thermal testing. Let's check some of the temperatures here with our temperature gun. And it looks like here we're doing pretty well at 26.5 degrees Celsius all along the right-hand side. all the way up to the corner of the chassis near the bezels. It heats up to about 30 degrees. Still nothing significant. As we mosey along right under the screen there where the hinges and the fan exhausts are located, we're about in the mid to maybe high 30s there. So 37, 36, 38, 37.8 degrees. I do have the fan set to max. And what that does is basically it produces so much suction that I believe this GPU is actually underwhelming for that cooling system here. I think that cooling system was designed perhaps with the 4080 or the 4090 in mind. And that's certainly showing here with the thermals. We're not getting anywhere near into the 40s even, or definitely not anywhere near close to 50. Particularly where you're resting your hands here, the WAS keys, we can see it's right about 31, 32, maybe 32.5 degrees in this area, which is very, very comfortable considering the ambient temperature in the room and where I'm at right now is about 21 degrees Celsius. So that's not that bad at all. And if we hover over here a little bit onto the screen bezel, I'll try to see if I can aim my laser correctly. We can see it jumps up to near 40 degrees. There's a few hot spots where you can detect 40 degrees, but for the most part, high 30 seems to be the way to go. Yeah, there was we hit 39.1. So all of there is exhausted back behind there onto the screen itself, but because the screen can tilt quite further back, that's actually where it lands. So as we can see here, it heats up, but nothing significant, nothing to worry about. I think the thermal solutions are finally fantastic. Of course, do not use this laptop on your lap when you're playing games or doing anything very intensive. It does heat up in this area, particularly underneath, up here as well in the center, but because that's generally going to be between your legs, depending on how you're positioned, you may not have any discomfort from this area. The sides remain relatively cool on both sides of the device, whether it's the left side or the right side. The trackpad area where the battery is generally located underneath is nice and cool. No issues there. Don't have to worry about batteries warping or potentially exploding due to overheating issues. And the keyboard area is generally very nice and cool all over the place. No hot spots. Maybe a few areas where it kind of jumps into the mid 30s, particularly towards the center of the keyboard. Nothing significant or to worry about there. I think this solution is very, very well done. The vapor chamber is definitely doing its job, and the big fans and the amount of space that you have inside this 18-inch chassis to move space really makes a huge difference in order to keep this thing cool. And for a quick overview of the SSD and the storage in this device, we've got a Samsung 1024 gigabyte SSD. It's a 1 terabyte storage. This is a PCIe Gen 4 device, so it should have very, very fast speeds. Theoretically, Gen 4 can reach up to 7,000 megabytes per second read and write. That's 7 gigabytes per second write. And if we look at the crystal disk mark numbers here, the read performance is excellent. It's right up there close to the 7,000 megabytes. That's the theoretical maximum for Gen 4 devices. But if we look at the write speed, it's below mediocre. In my other laptops, I run the SN850X from Western Digital, and that device gets very, very fast. It's, similar speeds for read and write. I use that in my desktops, in multiple desktops actually, and that device has not failed me yet. So I am a little bit disappointed that this Samsung device has such low write speeds. Usually Samsung SSDs is very, very good. In terms of reliability, you should have lots and lots of reliability in terms of the life of this SSD here. If we looked at the power on hours are only 20 hours on this device, and total writes that it's capable of before it dies and you have to replace it is 1700 gigabytes. That is quite a bit, pretty much a few years of use out of this device from read, write, saving. So you shouldn't have to worry about this device for a very long time. It's in good health and temperature is 42 degrees Celsius. It stays pretty low even while running all of these benchmarks numerous times. So it's a pretty good experience overall. All right, we're here on the Razer Blade 18 for 2023. Let's fire up hardware info and we'll look at some of the specs here and see what kind of components are in this device, particularly RAM, Bluetooth card, the manufacturer of the Ethernet adapter, because those things do make a difference in terms of reliability and experience, and if you want to run any other operating systems such as Linux, for example. So if we look at the motherboard here, it's just going to give you lots of info. I like this tool if you want to see real detailed information about your devices and the components that are in your PC. You've got a trusted platform module here, so TPM 2.0 is present. If we look at the memory here, we've got 2 sticks. And the nice thing about it is it tells you what the RAM is. So this is SK Hynix. The base speed of this RAM is 2800 megahertz, a DDR5 stick. 8 gigabytes per module, and there's 2 of these modules installed so that they can run in dual channel mode. The next thing we want to look at is the video adapter. So this one will tell us more about the NVIDIA graphics card that we have. So it has 8 gigabytes of GDR6 RAM from SK Hynix. The type of GPU is AD107. That is the GPU's core that NVIDIA uses to base the GPUs around. So that will be the core chiplet. The AD107 is the GPU itself, but then you add VRAM and all the other components that are required, display interface, etc., to actually make a graphics card that can go into your system. So you can see here, this is a PCI 4.0 graphics card at ×8 speed. Doesn't really matter. It shouldn't affect the speed at all. And it gives you some information about the base clocks and the graphics clocks, etc. All right, if we look at the monitor here, so this panel is manufactured by BOE. They're one of the largest LCD panel manufacturers in the world. And NE180QDM, this is the actual part number of this device. So if you go on panellook.com or if you search for this on Google, you'll find lots of information about this panel and the particulars of this particular unit. And if we look at the drives here, so it's got one NVMe drive. If we can expand this is a Samsung drive. It is a PCIe 4.0 drive as advertised on their page, and Samsung makes some excellent NVMe drives, so this is probably going to have some really good performance here. And audio wise, we've got the Intel Raptor Lake PC8 stuff here, and we've got the NVIDIA device that also provides some audio hardware. Network wise, we've got the Intel Wi-Fi 6E AX211, as I mentioned. That's a tri-band Wi-Fi / Bluetooth combo card. It can run on 2.4 gigahertz, 5 and 6 gigahertz. And for Ethernet, we've got a Realtek. I would have preferred Intel, but Realtek is fine. They can do 2.5 gigabit Ethernet on this device. And if we look at the battery here, we've got a Razer 91 watt hours lithium ion battery. And the status is discharging because obviously I'm running in battery mode, so that's what it is. So in closing, I would encourage you to go to my channel and look at the playlist of gameplay videos that I've had. As I mentioned, I'll be adding a few more gameplay clips to that collection so you can see in a variety of different games the frame rates and the actual gameplay and performance of this laptop. I hope you've enjoyed this content. It's taken me a few days, lots of late nights, and many hours of video footage. Some had to be redone because I made a mistake or audio wasn't present or something was going wrong. So lots and lots of energy and effort has been put into this review. If you like this content, if you found it useful, please share on other social media networks. That is the best way to help grow this channel, and so I can continue to bring you some similar content in the future. Thank you, and see you in the next one.